the amount of unstructured play in kids' lives has been steadily declining for decades. And I actually think the secret kind of product market kind of thing that Roblox did is it's a venue for unstructured play. We are essentially like a medium of shared experience to go hang out with our friends and have adventures, right? So a lot of what's in here, I think, is recreating some of the stuff that we loved about our past, right? So there's that back to the future kind of aspect to it.
You are the factor. Welcome, Craig Donato. You've been working in tech since Web 1.0. You've worked in classified sectors of the government. You've sold a company. You've been a CEO. And now you're at one of the largest online gaming companies appealing to 14-year-old boys and their parents' credit cards. And every single person I talk to knows you and adores you, which is really hard to do. It's pretty amazing. So Craig, you are the factor. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. This is cool. Hey, let's talk about Roblox. It's funny. I was chatting with a few of my colleagues about Roblox. These are hip women in Austin, Texas in tech, and they don't have kids. And their answer was Roa. They didn't know what it was. This is one of the biggest companies in tech, and they didn't know what it was. So for the folks watching that are millennial moms in Austin, Texas, and everywhere else in the world who don't know what Roblox is, tell us what Roblox is.
Sure. Roblox is a platform where about, a little over 150 million kids and teens come to play with their friends in these immersive 3D worlds. And one of the most distinctive things about Roblox is every single one of those worlds was built by someone in our community. So we have millions of kids, teens, predominantly kids and teens, building on our platform, creating these imaginative experiences. And that really has been a big fuel of our growth, right? Just anything you can imagine you can do on Roblox, whether it's explore a jungle, break out of prison, you can go to Roblox and do that with your friends.
150 million.
Yeah.
And she didn't know what it was. That's just incredible. So,
well, I think part of the reason they don't know what it is, we don't do any marketing, right? So it's very, very little. So it's all primarily, the number one way people find out about is word of mouth, right? So it's friends inviting other friends to play. So as a result, our brand is great among kids and teens. But if you don't have kids, you wouldn't probably know about us.
Right. Yeah. I have a 16-year-old son. I know all about Roblox. And so, okay, that's interesting. So you have created actual network effects, no marketing. That is an incredible thing to hear. What are the mechanisms? How do you do that? What did you do? How's that happened?
Yeah. So a couple things. You're lucky if you have one network effect. We're actually quite fortunate. We have two network effects going on.
Okay.
So one is the social network effect. The primary reason people come to Roblox is to play with their friends, right? So we can see almost like schools tipping, right? As more and more kids or their friends start to play, they want to be there because it's a place that they go to hang out and play with their friends. So obviously there's things that we do to make it easy to find your friends and to connect with them, but that's a huge factor and really driven our growth. The second network effect is a classic marketplace network effect, right? So, creators produce content. The more content they produce, the bigger the audience. The bigger the audience, the more content creators. And really machining that loop has been a huge part. So now we have millions of people developing content. We probably have over 20 million experiences, games published on our platform every year, right? So just a massive kind of loop. So both those things going has really enabled Roblox to take off in a big way over the last 3 or 4 years.
Right, that's incredible scale. So, so you're the chief. Okay, I have a bunch of questions, but you're the chief business officer. What does that mean?
So I'm primarily responsible for managing our 3 communities. So our first community is our players, so making sure they're safe, that we moderate and have good customer support all around the world. Second is our developer community, making sure that we're working with not only our top developers, but we're providing education programs such that anyone that's playing on Roblox can become a creator. And third is our employee community, so talent acquisition, that sort of thing. In addition to those things, I manage marketing, business development, and international. They're really
not too busy.
Standing to share. So not product, not finance, not engineering.
Right. So do you said that this growth is happening through the network effects, and you're not doing marketing. Are you tempted? I mean, 150 million is this incredible scale, but do you ever have dreams that it could be 550 million
Oh,
if you
oh,
did
oh.
marketing? I mean,
So actually, I think I can get there without doing a lot of marketing. So right now, our age range skews young, right? So we have about half the kids under 16 on our platform in the US right now. So our areas of growth are twofold. One is grow international, right? So
mhm.
now available in 6 different languages. So we're seeing really good growth outside the US and in Europe, Asia. And the other is actually slowly seeing our demographics expand, seeing older kids stick on the platform, right? So
Mhm.
13 to 17 and 17 to 24 are our fastest growing demographics. So both those things, if we can both kind of age up our audience as well as expand internationally, that'll drive a lot of growth. And those things are happening as a result of our loops. So for example, we're doing things with discovery to make sure that developers can build games tailored for an older audience as well as a younger audience, and that people can find those games. So you machine those systems, those loops, to make sure that they're creating divergence in terms of enabling kind of a wider audience to exist on our platform. So there's a lot we're doing, tweaking the knobs of those systems and those loops to enable those things to happen.
That makes sense. So, I grew up, you'd go to 7-Eleven and put a quarter in a game and play the game that was developed for the arcade system.
Yeah,
Now you have developers creating, would you say 20 million games a year?
yeah,
I mean,
probably more than that. Yeah.
that's just incredible. How did you nurture a community like that? Like what did you do that nurtured this community of creators?
Well, obviously I've been at Roblox for 4 years, so the company's been around for 15 years. So it's been a long, slow curve.
Yeah.
So a lot of the foundational work was done before I got there. A lot of what we've tried to do is just tend to it, and for both loops, trying to figure out where the friction is and just remove the friction. Like we find what we can already see what users, whether it be creators or whatever, are trying to do. How do we get out of the way? How do we make it easier for them to do? So, for example, with developers, it's not that we just give them tools. We think about everything a 15-year-old needs to produce, build, deploy, operate a game played by millions of people, right? So we provide them free tools, we host it, we translate it, we do payment process, and we make sure it's compliant across different worlds. So all the friction, right, that's required in doing that, we just are just relentless about removing it, right? And so a lot of what we've done in terms of building out our developer relations group or other things has all been about just getting out of the way and removing friction from those loops.
That's incredible. So let's talk a little bit about the revenue streams for Roblox.
Mhm.
It's interesting. Well, what are Roblox's revenue streams and how have they evolved over the years? And really, maybe even before we get into that, let's talk about the Roblox story. You mentioned it's been 15 years. I don't
Yeah.
think even the people who know about Roblox would even know that. So how has that patience played in the growth of the company? And what's the story of that 15 years?
Yeah, our founder, Dave, before he started Roblox, had created an educational software company, and it enabled kids to model physics experiments. And he found that after they did the experiments, they would use his platform, these tools, to create cars and crash them in each other or build houses. And he realized, wow, there's something here. So his vision for what Roblox has become is pretty much the same as what he thought 15 years ago. He's just been absolutely relentless, and he's someone with a super high degree of integrity in terms of like, I'm going to do the right thing. That's what I want to build. And his patience wore off. I mean, as a former CEO myself, to have the ability to stick with it that long, I give him a tremendous amount of credit to have that level of conviction. But he's been incredibly patient. Our investors have been incredibly patient, and no, it's been amazing to see especially the last few years.
Yeah, that's cool. And so let's talk about the revenue streams. What
Sure.
are the revenue streams? Because, kids can go in and just jump right into the barrier to entry to start using is
Yeah.
very low. So how do you monetize
Yeah.
Roblox?
It's actually simple. We basically have our own currency, Robux, that kids can buy. And then we let the developers, the people that are building the games, sell things in their games. And that's pretty much it. We take a cut. Now, again, back to these notion of loops and systems, we created the right kind of reinforcement loop. So if people are too aggressive in charging too much, there's plenty of other games to play. They won't play them, right? And if they come up with innovative ways to monetize and charge in their game, it gets copied and morphed and modded, right? So the system itself is getting more efficient over time, which is great to see. But it's all about setting up proper feedback loops and making sure that the system monitors itself. So, we'll have the developers in our community will make well over $150 million this year. So we have some of these young developers making, millions of dollars a year on their games.
Wow. So they're actual creators, just like all the influencers on YouTube or any other platform.
Absolutely. And years ago,
Incredible.
the typical use case was one kid, teen or, someone in college. Now they're developing studios. They're meeting in our online forums and they're forming teams, sometimes teams of kids in different countries that have never physically met. And then they're building more and more complex creations. So we're seeing evolution in terms of the sophistication of them working together. And that's, of course, back to friction. Now we're building a lot of tools like Team Create and things that enable larger and larger teams to work together dynamically on our platform. So it's been fascinating to watch that.
That is cool. So you're saying like a developer could come in, prove themselves first, then they could recruit younger developers, almost build like a company. I mean, it's almost a little bit of MLM, right?
Now they do create LLCs, right? So they're
sweet.
And there's artists, there's business people, there's coders, and they build reputations and they form teams and build these experiences. Absolutely.
How do I get my son to start doing this, Craig? Like he plays all the time. He's like such a consumer of gaming. I'm like, dude, you could be making some money. Like, get to work. How do I do that?
A big part of our mission is making sure kids know that that all the people on our platform can be creators, right? So we have, I don't know, hundreds of hours of tutorials online that are available for free. We do all sorts of things in terms of game jams and other things to try to inspire kids to actually create. So that I hope he does. We'd love to support that.
All right, I might call you out for like a little extra love in there.
Right.
I'm always asking. I'm already asking you tons of favors. Okay, I'm looking for some advice for startup founders.
Mm-hmm.
As founders, we come up with really novel ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not always easy to monetize.
Mm-hmm.
So what advice, with all your experience,
yeah,
how does a founder approach? Maybe they've created a great platform, maybe they've created a great mobile app, or a marketplace, whatever the case may be. What approach should a founder take, and what advice do you have for a founder to take to create revenue streams?
Yeah, well, two things that I always try to do is one is start sooner than you think, right? So by the time there's pressure to create revenue, if that's when you start, you'll do some unreasonable things that don't make sense to you, right? So start a lot earlier than you think in terms of just trying things out and seeing what sticks on the wall. And the second is see if you can find a way to make money that's consistent with your overall value proposition. So for example, the Roblox revenue, it all fits together, right? It's part of the system. Everybody kind of wins and it fits together. A lot of times advertising, there's this kind of in peanuts mismatch, right? Like you're trading off one audience versus another. And, great, I've always tried, even in my prior company, Oodle, trying to think through how we actually create these systems where the right person is paying and everybody in the system benefits, right? It's accretive to everyone. And it takes time to figure that out. And it means that you're not just doing the standard out-of-box stuff like slapping ads and something. But if you can do that, I think you can create very large companies that way.
Good advice. How about strategic partnerships? You have a lot of experience in building strategic partnerships, probably both monetary and just value exchange, non-monetary. Talk to me about the different types of strategic partnerships that Roblox have undertaken.
Yes, I mean, recently, way back when I started, we had a very small advertising business, and it didn't make a lot of sense. It wasn't growing that quickly. We weren't really sure that was consistent with our brand overall, so we shut it down. And we decided we'd take a different tack. So we thought about, we did a survey of our users and said, what brands do they love the most? And then we
Your
reached out.
users,
Yeah,
your
we did a
users,
survey.
right?
Mhm. And we said, let's go talk to, rather than the ad agency, let's go talk to the CMOs of those companies and think about how we could engage them. Like what makes sense, right? So, we did something with the NFL around the Super Bowl where the kids got to wear their uniforms, or WrestleMania, they got to become their favorite characters, or we did something with Marvel and Disney in terms of Avengers gear and stuff. So it was super fun for the brand, super great for our users. And now that's kind of opening up all sorts of possibilities about how could we work with them in a more structured way. Back to the kind of the revenue stuff, I think there could be really interesting immersive forms of advertising that we do as a result of this. Or we'll see where it goes, but it's been fun to just kind of take that stance and just think, well, how do we figure out what you want and what we have, and how they come together in a way that benefits the community. Similarly, back when I was at Nextdoor, we were trying to figure out, how to monetize that platform. When we spent some time with local businesses, both small local businesses as well as big local businesses like Home Depot and stuff, and just had to have some very strategic kind of conversations up front where we weren't heavy pitching, just to try to figure and test some things out. So those things have worked out really, really well for us, both in the previous companies and certainly at Roblox.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, how does a startup founder know if a partnership has value? In my experience, you can see something really sexy. Oh, I'm talking to
Yeah.
the BDD of such and such, and it sounds very sexy, and it can be a huge distraction. What advice do you have for a founder to know when something is a distraction and when something actually has value that they should be chasing?
Boy, that's a great question. Let me think about that. At some point you do it for so many years, it kind of becomes intuitive.
Hmm.
Let's see. Part of it is being, I think, sober about the real impact it will have on your business, right? Like, so I think you can talk yourselves into a lot of things about, oh, this is going to be so great if this and this and this happens. But, we started with, back to the Roblox example, our customers love these brands, right? Whether it be Nike or, so we start with that. Like, we have 100 million people that love your brand. Okay, that there's something there, right?
No
And then
doubt.
trying to see whether or not the brand was willing in game. So for example, one of the big things we were pushing at the time was a lot of traditional companies back in the day, like the NFL, charge for their IP. The question was, look, we've got this audience, you know, give us the IP, right?
Right.
And we'll figure. So they had to put something on the table. Like, a lot of times when you're doing these tests with brands, you're asking them, but they're not really putting value on the table, right? Like, just like for early advertiser customers, if you give the product away, you've really not validated anything, right? So
Right.
trying to make sure that they're putting something of real value on the table. I feel confident that we can deliver something of value, or at least figure it out. And then we've got both have something at stake to try to figure something out. I think a lot of these things where, you can get someone and they just get to do something for free, or it's super easy for them to do, they're not really committed. So trying to really suss out that level of commitment.
Yeah, that's good. Um, Roblox is interesting. My son plays it in his room. He's a big gamer, and pandemic hits in North America around March. And he looks up, and by June he's like, "Oh, something going on,"
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
He's in his
In
room
my house.
jamming anyway. He's
Yeah.
on a headset talking with his friends. So have you seen user segment change? Like, because in essence, gamers are playing in their room now. They're not going to arcades like a
Yeah.
1,000 years ago. So have users changed the way they interact with the platform? Have you seen growth? Has it been declining? What's been happening since pandemic?
Certainly hasn't been declining. It's gone up. I mean, we're fortunate in
Figured.
that it's not a traditional gamer audience, right? So we're about a little over 40% self-identified as female, right? So it's an even mix and wide age range. So there's all different types of experiences. Um, what we've seen around, so certainly new people coming on the platform, we're a place, again, where people hang out with their friends. So we enable them to stay socially connected while they remain physically apart. So we have a feature called private servers, where if you're in an experience, you can say, I only want to play this with my friends. So that feature has really taken off, and we've seen it used for people hanging out at recess with their friends, virtual, or birthday parties, or these sorts of things, where it's becoming kind of not just going there to play, but just to hang out, right, in the virtual world.
Right.
So So those use cases have really expanded during COVID.
Oh,
And
that's
we've
great.
also seen a lot, our numbers in terms of the creators, right? Building things, people
Okay.
on studio using our education has also exploded. So people using their time, and we did a bunch of outreach to educators and stuff in this, but trying to really encourage kids to use this time to, if they got a little extra time on their hands, now would be a great time to build a game.
Yeah, Phoenix. Now would be a great time to build a game and
That's
make some
right.
money, Phoenix. Trying to get him to start making some cash, contributing to the household income, Craig. That's crazy. You know, this pandemic, we were just talking how you and I talked a couple days ago, and since that, 48 hours, it's been a complete change in the world already.
Yeah.
Um, it's been interesting. We're seeing businesses close.
Yeah.
We're seeing market caps double. I mean, just like really, really big changes happening due to this global
Mhm.
pandemic. What do you think is next in terms of um, where is it going? What winners are going to see? What losers are we going to see?
Well, that's a broad question. I feel like I'm so fixated on Roblox. It's hard for me to
Sure.
even get a market perspective. I mean,
Yeah.
for us at least, we don't think of it as a gaming platform. We think of ourselves as a platform where people come to do things with other people in the digital world, right? And how do we think about in the time of COVID? What that means is really expanding the range of things to do, right? So a game for us is a shared experience where people get to do play, but how do we enable them not just to play together, but whether it be to watch a video together or listen to music together, these sorts of things. So for us, it's trying to think a little bit about both the consumer habit and how they're changing, because I don't think they'll go fully back, right? So we're now experiencing all these different things about what's possible to do online. Like, wow, actually, that's going to be part of my repertoire now. So how do we actually invest in those things right now? Secondly, there's all these deals that are possible to be done now that couldn't have been done
Right.
at the time of COVID. So this is a very interesting time, I think, in terms of any business thinking about how they relate to this and what's likely to stick around, and how do I actually during this time figure out how to take advantage. Not take advantage is probably the wrong word, but at least you know understand where
Seize
we
the
are.
opportunity. Yeah,
You
seize
see
the
the
opportunity of
opportunity.
this time.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm
That's
with you.
exactly.
No, I think that's an important outlook right now that every business person and founder has to be thinking about right now is how do I seize this opportunity to take advantage of this really tragic time. But look, there's always something,
Right. Well,
right?
habits change, right? Habits
Right.
change, and now there's a shift happening. So as an entrepreneur, right, you need to look at that they create moments of disruption, right,
Right.
which are there for us to take advantage of. So certainly this is a big opportunity in terms of those that understand how to capitalize on that disruption.
Right. So you're on the C-suite. You've been a founder yourself, and you've
Yeah.
built a C-suite. So you've been on a lot of executive teams. Uh, I think it's so important for startup founders and their leadership team and management teams to have really good functioning executive team meetings. Uh, give some advice, like looking back on your years of experience and even your current executive team meetings with Roblox. What are the top 5 habits or the top 5 ways to have really functional, meaningful executive meetings?
Wow, you're asking me some good questions here.
I'm just riffing, man. I'm riffing
Yeah,
with it.
yeah, I know it's good. It's like wow, I gotta really think about this. This is
You're
good.
all, shit, I have
No
to think
prep on
about
this.
this? Can we talk about the 14-year-old boys again?
Oh, well, okay. Let me see if I can just kind of
Yeah,
riff on.
yeah.
So, um, look, first, wow,
And
teams.
as you're thinking, look, let me put a little more context on it.
Yeah.
Look, I know I'm a multi-time founder, and I always thought executive teams and it was like a bunch of nonsense. And look, we're all here, we're all creative, it's a flat organization. Let's all just go out there, be productive, and crush. And as you learn, when you start to grow a company, you need a leadership team.
Absolutely.
And it's not about hierarchy; it's about vision. It's about learning when to say no, just those types of things. And as well as I do, those meetings are just and those teams are so important. A good functioning management team
Yeah.
is what you bet on, right? So
Right.
when you look back at all your time and even currently at Roblox, like what are those what advice could you give to that founder who's like ready to embark on their first executive team?
Yeah. So, one of the things I'd say is, in addition to just the meetings, it's creating that sense of team itself, right? Because, the meeting can go either way, but it's, are we really operating as a high functioning team, right? Which is all about trust. And I think that, certainly I've tried to do this. I think, Dave did a great job at this at Roblox, is being very, very clear about our values, right? And, our values, like, when we think about Roblox values, they're not like standard values that can be good for anyone. We believe, for example, in self-organizing teams, and we believe in, there's certain, I won't go take you through the whole thing, but very differentiated things that we all come together on. And so we have that kind of common framework, and we've been able to foster a sense of team where we can disagree, right? There's no, like, what kills a lot of teams a lot of times is conflict avoidance, right? So we can disagree with each other, but at the end we can all come together, and avoiding things like politics, and part of that comes from, I think, the values, a strong sense of mission, right, and purpose. Like, we all believe we're there. We're all striving to help move this company forward. And at the end of the day, so those things, I think, you can vary the tactics and how the meetings, the agenda, but really taking the time to create a sense of team is super important. And I think, one of the things that we've spent a lot of time thinking about is, especially for new members that come on the team in the time of COVID, right? So much of that is building that sense of trust and getting to know each other. And how do we do that now, right? I mean, we have members of our executive team that I've never actually physically met before. That's really bizarre, right? Now, I think we are okay because we have such a strong sense of team already, but it requires a level of intention, right, about how we do this and how we maintain it. And those are conversations we're having right now, because this could go on for a long time.
Yeah, no doubt. Hopefully not, but it's looking that way. Okay, there's something I've always been curious about with Roblox. So, and I'm trying to think back to my own experience. I know you don't do a lot of marketing, but there is marketing. Do you market to, the 14-year-old, or do you market to the parents? And this is the root of my question. How do you get into that share of wallet? Because, and you tell me, do 14-year-olds, my kid doesn't have a credit card, but do 14-year-olds these days do 150 million of them have credit cards? Do they go to their parents' credit card? How do you get into the kid's wallet?
Yeah, so marketing obviously exists in lots of different forms, right? So from a brand perspective, especially where we're trying to grow the brand, when we look at, we have a toy line, we take a lot of the characters in the games and we turn them into toys, and they're sold at Walmart and Target. And we think about, that's a form of marketing, right? In terms of that level of branding, that kind of stuff, whether it be the gift cards, right? We want to make sure that the branding would appeal to a 13 to 15-year-old, right? So there's a sense of brand consistency and voice that we do, but we're not really actively marketing. I mean, we'll occasionally do some acquisition tests and stuff like that, but that's not what we're doing. We do make sure that we have, especially through corporate communications, that we're communicating to parents, right? That they know about how much we're obsessed about the safety of our community, right? And moderation, these sorts of things. And we were also trying to figure out how to straddle the communication between the two of them. So one of the things that's interesting that we found is that kids these days live in a different reality than you and I did, right? So they're living, one half of their life is online and half is in the real world. And for them, it's one thing, right? It's just one integrated reality. For us, they're distinct things, right? Which is why, your son and my son, the COVID thing is like a speed bump. I think actually my son is very introverted. I think he's happier, right? He's got more
totally. Oh,
out,
absolutely.
Right?
So is Phoenix. Yeah, no doubt.
So the thing is that's interesting for us is we don't know this world that they're in, right? And all the things that are happening in Discord and Roblox. And what's tricky for them is if they have concerns or issues, they're very reluctant to go to their parents because their parents' reaction is scary, right? And shut it down. And that's the primary way a lot of them connect with their friends. So a lot of what we're trying to figure out now is how do we actually take our relationship with our users and understand what issues they have and really make sure that we're surfacing similar to parents so they understand, right, what's happening, such they can actually have that conversation with their kids, because the kid's not going to bring it up to them. So there's a lot of work we're doing from a civility perspective. So a lot of the marketing for parents is around both what we do and what parents should care about in terms of safety, but also helping promote that dialogue and helping their parents understand what's going on in this online transition. So, when we think about like our audiences that we market to, parents is one of them, and the other is recruits, right? It's an insanely competitive valley, moment of the valley to hire people. So, we think a lot about placing stories with the eye of, can this help our recruiting efforts? So, our audience is kind of mapped to those things, ironically, not so much directly to our player audience.
Oh, interesting. That makes sense. You tapped into something that I would love to explore,
Sure.
and it's a little Black Mirror, right? You have a unique insight. You get to watch hundreds of millions of segments of people essentially have their community online, and I see it in my household, right? My son's friends are on the headset, and it's real friendships, right?
Yes, absolutely.
What I want to ask is this going to change an entire generation? So I just heard yesterday that Amazon has a device. Have you heard about this device? They're working on a device, or I guess they've launched or testing a device that essentially is your sentiment measurer. So in other words, and there's a video out on it right now. Something like, I should know this. Sorry, I'm not prepared for this, but it's something like, a husband and wife are talking, and it'll say, Craig, you're being sarcastic. So it's like correcting you, right? A little Black Mirror-ish. Right. I'm like, I don't need that. My wife knows when I'm being a jerk. There's a great funny anecdote where, somebody put out, which is, man, I miss the days when, television was free and I paid for porn. So now you have just unlimited access to porn, which I understand is changing the way young men and even young women are acting in the bedroom their first or second time. Online communities are changing the way we have our interactions with people. Where is this all going? Is it going to change a generation? Is it going to change a generation of young men, young women, people? Where's it going?
Let's kind of tease it apart a bit. So one thing that's interesting is, I think a lot of what's happening is a little bit of Back to the Future. So when you and I grew up, I know you're about my age, I'd come home from school, and I'd get on my bike without a helmet and disappear with my friends. I played pickup football, I built a fort, and then until the streetlights came on, I came home, right?
Bingo.
So we were out there using our imagination. It was great. That's not my kids, right? My kids, have a ton of adult-directed after-school activities, hours of homework, right? So what's been interesting, and we work with a lot of child psychology experts, and the amount of unstructured play in kids' lives has been steadily declining for decades. And I actually think the secret kind of product market kind of thing that Roblox did is it's a venue for unstructured play. We are essentially like a medium of shared experience to go hang out with friends and have adventures, right? So a lot of what's in here, I think, is recreating some of the stuff that we loved about our past, right? So there's that Back to the Future kind of aspect to it.
Interesting.
But it is a world, right, where, in a lot of ways, it's a lot safer in that we track everything everyone's saying, everyone's interacting with, right? So part of ours is like, how is this kind of digital reality, how do we make it appropriate and safe and a place almost like a training ground, right? So for example, and we have all these age dependent filters, right? So if you're under 13, we take active steps to make sure you don't share your real world identity, because that's not safe. And that's part of what we teach kids, right? So you can't put in a phone number, can't put in an address. We don't let you share links so you can take the conversation off our platform or share pictures, right? So it scales depending on how old you are, but there's all these bumper guards to make sure that you're safe. And we also try to do things which are, with the idea that let's teach kids how to be safe in these digital universes. And also we also arm them with self-moderation tools. So if I'm having an experience I don't like, I can mute you or block you, right? So we did a survey recently, one of those surveys that I mentioned earlier, and we asked people, Um, if you encounter a bully, right? Who's the number one person? And we hadn't ranked the people you go to. Of course, parents were like 17th on the list, right? Number one was Roblox, which is fine, which is great.
Really?
But number two was the bully. And I'm like,
Really?
that's great, right? Because I'm able to confront the bully, right? I'm not going to physically get harmed, right? I can
Yeah,
always
that's true.
walk out of the experience, but like the rules are different here. And we try to do our efforts. So we actually just released today a game that teaches safety and civility. The kids can play the game and it teaches them all these kind of things about how to act in this world. So we're trying to train them because you're right. It's very, very different. And ultimately, I think, what the internet did to information, right? Which means it's just vast. I have instant access to everything anywhere. I mean, people don't remember what it was like, right? To have to
Nope.
look up an encyclopedia, right? It blew everyone's minds. I think what we're talking about here, which is a lot of people call the metaverse, is going to do the same thing for social connections. I can connect and do things with anyone, anywhere, anytime. Of course, that's going to have both positives and negatives, right? So we're trying to, make sure that people understand what the right code of conduct, appropriate behaviors are in this kind of new world, so they can enjoy all the positives, right? But it's always going to be a mixed bag, right? So that's what we're going to have to figure out together. So, is it going to be vastly different? Of course, just like, the internet did that to information. So I think it's going to be vastly different. What it's going to look like, we have no idea, right? But I think we're starting to understand, whether it be best practices for safety or even encouraging civility. Like, how do we encourage people to be civil to one another? How do we enable them to do things like protests, but also be respectful to one another?
I like that.
It's tricky.
Yeah. No, that is tricky, but I like that. Yeah. You have a platform to help be a positive force of change. I mean, really help train a generation. I mean, really.
We that's how we feel. We have a big responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah. On the other side, you must have constant battles with predators. I mean, it's got to be, right? You've got a platform full of young kids. I mean, do you have like deals with law enforcement? How do you suss out, bullies or predators or psychos on the platform and get them out of there?
Oh gosh, yeah, this we do a lot. So first off, we for in a game itself, right? We human review all the content in a game, right? So we know what's in there, and we have thousands of moderators, right, that we employ all over. Second is we have and we use automated technology as well. Second, we're tracking everything everyone's doing and running through all sorts of machine learning algorithms, tracking everything everyone's saying, what they're doing, making sure it's okay, not okay, and we're always adopting those filters to take into account Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter. Like, how do we feel about that? What's the right action to take? Self-moderation tools, whether it be parental controls, self-moderation, all these sorts of things. So yeah, it is a constant, as you can imagine, right? 150 million teams, right? It's a huge effort. So we're always, it's our number one focus, right? Is the safety. So we're always innovating new technology, whether it be scanning the games themselves, and so a tremendous amount of work. And we work with governments in terms of advocating for child safety rights. We are active members of, probably over a dozen child safety organizations. So yeah, now this is our mission, right? This is all about who we are. Right. So we lean into it. It's never perfect. You just can only strive to do better each day. And that's how it comes. So if something happens, we figure it out, we diagnose it, it can never happen again, and we're just going to get better and better. And I think it's tricky, because I think for UGC businesses, I mean, we've been doing this for 15 years. The moat around this is pretty high, right? Like in terms of the systems and the processes and the technology and stuff to root this out. But, it's a huge mammoth effort on our part. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad it's a big focus. That's great. Dude, you've had an awesome career, like a dope career. Take me through it. Because I know, you said you started.
I'm glad that you say that. I think that feels good for you to say. I've certainly had my successes and my struggles, for sure.
Well, right? Yeah, I know, so, but it's been pretty dope. Like, tell me about, take us through your career.
Started off as an engineer, and was very fortunate. I was, went to school on the East Coast, ended up in Washington, D.C., working for a company that developed software for the government. And I was very fortunate that my first project was to essentially build search technology for the Pentagon. This is pre-internet, right? So
Wow.
got to play with a lot of good toys and, had top secret clearance and all that crazy stuff. And then we started to commercialize that technology. And,
Who was president? Who was president while you were doing that?
Oh God.
You remember?
It was in the 80s. I think it was probably Reagan.
Oh, wow. Reagan. Cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Super cool. So you were early, man. You were DARPANet.
It was pretty cool. Like we were testing out TCP/IP drivers and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
So we were trying to commercialize the technology, and as a government contracting firm, they had no knowledge about how to do that. And I spent so many years of my life investing in this stuff. I'm like, I got to go figure this out. So I went and got my MBA and switched over to more of the marketing partnership side. And after business school, I was pretty fortunate. I found a company that was doing technology that was very similar to all the research that I had done, a company called Architects. So about 10 people, and joined that company. And that company later became Excite, right? And you remember that. A lot of people don't know. It's kind of
still alive,
Google,
baby.
It was
it's
like
Web 1.0, right? Before pre-Google.
Hardcore search technology. So, that company grew to probably, 5,000-6,000 people. And we sold it to at home for, I think, $6.5 billion. It was pretty good in the time, right? So it's crazy to see that growth. And that was right in the heydays of the internet. So no one knew what it was. And so that was hugely fun, right?
Yeah. 10 people to 6,000. Amazing.
Yeah. So I came off that, great. And then I was brought in to be CEO of a company that was kind of doing kind of B2B internet stuff. And really cool, but just too early, right? I mean, sometimes, how many times you've probably heard this, and this thing's like, it's all about timing, right? Like you can have everything else going, but if the timing's wrong, you're screwed, right? So we were essentially we assumed, right, that there would be a cloud and there would be all these cloud services, right? Back in the day, ASPs like Salesforce, there'd be hundreds of these, and people would be pretty good assumption, right?
Yeah, pretty spot on.
Bad timing.
Very early. Yeah.
So we had built all this infrastructure about connecting all these things, and of course 9/11 happened. It was all about security and locking down your cloud, and
that's right.
That just wasn't going anywhere. So I learned an immense amount of that. That was, that did not end well. I was a first-time CEO, which everyone, I guess, all CEOs are a first-time CEO somewhere, right? Which is really, really, really hard. Made tons of mistakes. Probably the thing that I probably take away most there was, at one point, the culture of the company was really messed up, that I was brought in to lead, and work with some folks that teach at Stanford Business School and Harvard Business School about what is culture and how can you change it. And that's been transformational in my career. I mean, so to briefly restate it, a lot of times we think of culture as a personality. It's emergent behavior. And if you define it as that way, you can't do anything with that, right? It's something you hold for. And they told me that culture are just established social norms. And they showed me an old video where, someone gets on an elevator, and if everyone's facing the wrong way, what do? You face that the wrong way. Like, we're social animals. So how do you align the social norms very explicitly with your strategy, right? And there are very things like, if you want to be innovative, it could be things like hold an idea lightly. And rather than even like going in and saying, I'm going to give you a PowerPoint on our new culture, he just had the senior management team live 3 things, right? We're going to do these 3 things, which we all agreed about were important, strategically important to us. And in about a week or 2, people go, what's different around here, right? And now you had to not tolerate. You had to not tolerate transgression, because if you don't if you tolerate it, it means you don't value it, right? So
that's right.
But it was amazing how quickly culture changed. Right?
And that was intentional too. I mean,
intentional.
You said the 3 things were like these.
And
are
then
the
we brought the next layer in, and we said to directors, and we said, okay, these are 3. Let's add another thing. And it was all about creating an intentional culture, right? And some people didn't make it. Like some people couldn't, right? People that want to be the smartest smartest person in the room, like. You're great, but this isn't going to be the place for you. So that really was hugely transformational for me because after that I went and started my own company, and I feel really proud about the culture that we developed there because it was very intentional and great thing for my toolbox. But of course, you learn things like that under
Oh yeah.
under tough situations. So I then started my own company called Oodle. I think Oodle did okay. I mean, I'd say how I would describe Oodle is it had the curse of the B minus, right? So
Okay.
Oodle, we did really, really well. We got up to 15 million users. We were profitable, probably growing 10 to 15, maybe 20% per year. But that's not good enough for like venture returns, right? So can't shut it down. It's doing well, right?
Right.
Not good enough for escape velocity. And we dodged. We did a really big deal with Facebook back in the day. We did a lot of bobs and weaves, but we just couldn't get liftoff
And
in a
why
huge
was that?
way.
What was that? Why didn't it? I mean, you got deals with Facebook.
Yeah,
You went through your failure as a first time CEO, so you got that
yeah,
humility, those lessons.
yeah.
And what made it why didn't it take off?
So it's great culture, hired great people. So we did a couple things well. So one of the things in a two-sided marketplace is one of the first things you need to do to get that going is you need to figure out to make it one-sided. So we did some really innovative things back in the day in terms of aggregating classifieds from different sources and really cool stuff. So I think we really got it working well. What it did though is it enabled us to scale too fast, right? So we were instantly able to go from one market using this stuff to markets across the globe and different, US and different categories. And especially in a two-sided marketplace, there's so much subtlety in terms of product market fit, right? You need to sit in that uncomfortable zone for a while and just really figure it out. And we blew right past that. So we were growing, we were leveraging SEO, which isn't really organic growth, right? SEO, we were
Right.
going to have distribution partners and revenue and all those things, but we hadn't really gotten product market fit.
That's
And
interesting.
that's a tough situation, right? So you're trying to go back to fix some of those things. You've got now partners and you're trying to grow your top line. That was really, really tricky.
It was
So,
almost like, yeah, you guys were almost too good for your own good. Does that make sense? Like you were really
yeah,
good at all the tactics, but you
yeah,
hadn't that patience of figuring out that product market fit and maybe the soul of the brand or something like that. Is that right?
yeah. No, people really dug it. It just, especially there's a whole set of circumstances that happened. At the
Sure.
time, we indexed. This is before Craigslist and way before Facebook Marketplace. We were Facebook Marketplace back then, but we were able to, we had all these things where if you were looking for something, you didn't have to search Craig, you just put an alert, right? And all of a sudden you get an email. This user just posted this and you could buy, like,
I
it
love
was
that.
phenomenal. But then, Craigslist blocked us and all these other things happened that we ended up reacting to over time. But, it's okay. Like we bobbed and weaved. Look, I think at the end of the day, we probably should have focused more on product market fit. I think as a CEO, while I had learned a lot from my last experience, I think as I kind of look at myself, I'm, one of the things as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, is you're kind of this rugged individual. You like to make things happen on your own. And I think, at the time I didn't do a good job asking for help, right? I look
Hmm.
back and I could have done a much better job asking my board for help, asking my network for help than I did. So, I look back on that and I could have done a better job and maybe that could have been the difference, right? Like there's so much that needs to go right to make a startup happen. And this is interesting. I don't know if we've ever talked about this before, but like I view like a startup CEO. It's like a giant self-help exercise, right? Like it's a giant mirror, right? Anything about you that's kind of screwed up, you just see it. Like if you're conflict avoidant,
Oh,
there it is, right?
oh
So
yeah.
like there's this kind of whole thing. Like you don't ask for, So I really enjoyed that part of it because it forces you to work on yourself. I had some
Yep.
work to do, so
Yeah.
obviously I could have grown as a CEO, but look, we sold the company to QVC. Felt really,
That's
really good about
amazing
that.
right there. You sold the company. I mean, this QVC,
Yeah,
that's like, I mean, the movie Joy, right? I mean, that's
yeah,
QVC, right?
absolutely, yeah.
That's so cool that you sold how was that experience selling to QVC? I mean, this is a company that has, I mean, it's a media that has like 85 million shoppers at any one time. It's just incredible, incredible scale. How did that come to be? How'd you sell it to QVC?
So we prior to towards the end, we did a deal with Facebook. We were operating the Facebook marketplace, and we were really innovating at that time with how to make commerce social, right? So, a lot of commerce is utilitarian, transactional, give them information. It starts with this idea of the demand already exists, right? I'm just solving utility. How do we make commerce fun? How do we make it social, right? So, as it relates to classifieds, we learned all these things like we call one the power of why, which is if you're selling things to your friends, why you're selling it, why I'm selling that couch, if it's in my
Right.
Facebook feed, is a lot more interesting than I'm selling a couch, right? I'm remodeling my house, right? And the idea of asking, right? When I know the community, right? I can ask. Like I'm not unlikely to do that when I don't know who I'm asking. So, for example, I remember once on our platform, I have a foster daughter, and she had wrecked her car, and I was like, "Does anyone have a used car that they're thinking about trading in that I could buy? Because I want to get her a good quality car." Well,
Sure.
one of my friends that had done really well was like, "I was about to trade this on. She can have it." Right. So, like, how do you all these wonderful serendipitous things started to happen, and it was because we were really zoning in on
The
how you make
story.
commerce. And some of this stuff is very true in
Yeah, a
next
little
door
bit.
too.
Yeah, that's very
Social.
cool.
So what we as we were doing research, we realized that to a large extent, what QVC does is amazing, right? And that no one shows up with a QVC with an intention to buy the stuff that's on there, right? In 2 minutes, right? They have to inspire you to want something, consider it, and then close the deal, right? And they're like,
Wow.
wow, that's amazing. So we actually went out and I started talking to them about some of the stuff that we had learned, and asking them about what their plans were. And they came in, they brought us to help them figure out how to take their TV experience and convert it to an online experience. And I think it was
Oh.
really super helpful to them. And we learned a ton about the psychology of selling. It was fantastic.
Yeah, biology. I mean, that's an incredible acquirer. That was a good deal? Was that a good deal? Were you
Yeah,
happy with the deal?
it's great. Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Yeah,
glad that it happened. I felt really happy, and that we found a home for the company. So yeah, people stayed. I learned a tremendous amount. Enjoyed working there for a few
cool.
years. Yeah, it was nice.
Yeah,
So
I bet you get some good
I
insights.
I did that Oodle, and then after I sold it, and I did a lot of soul searching about what I wanted to do next in my life,
Hmm.
and ended up doing some some retreat where you really think about why do you make the decisions that you make in your life,
Oh,
and
cool.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs have dad issues that they need to resolve, right? I prove myself to somebody.
Yeah.
So yeah, same here, right? So the thing is, like, why am I doing this? And I love so many things about being in startups. I love um, creating teams and taking the hill. But I had kids in high school, or they just were entering high school, and you know how it is. As a CEO, right? 95% of your brain cycles are always on the company. You never can put down the bag, right?
Million
So
percent.
I was like, what I want to do for this next chapter while they're in high school is I want to go be a part of a team. I will go, devote myself to a team, but I won't be the guy. I'll be the guy that supports the guy. And which will give me a little bit of mental space. I'll still work hard, obviously, right? But
Of
give me
course.
the mental space to just spend some time with my family. So went around, went to next door for a year, and then my buddy Dave, an old friend of mine who's the founder of Roblox, talked to me about joining his company. So yeah, I've had a great time being member of an executive team, and I think it's been helpful having sat in the CEO seat, kind of trying to be helpful if I can. And they know, like, once you're in the seat, like I know what that's like. I'm
Yeah,
not
you've been
I'm
through
not
it,
taking
man.
I'm
Yeah.
not I'm not in competition for the seat. Like, I know what that's like.
Yeah.
But how can I help? Right? Like, this
Right.
is what I've seen, and it's been fantastic. I've really really enjoyed it. And would I ever go back to being a CEO someday? Perhaps. I loved it, but
Yeah.
I'm extremely happy with how that decision worked out for me.
That's incredible. What a great journey, man. What an
Yeah, it
awesome
has been.
journey. Awesome journey. So, what's next at Roblox? You know, do you see it? You going international? You ever
Yeah.
think about taking the company public? I mean, what do you guys think about? for
Yeah, I
what's
mean, I think
next?
we're fortunate in that the company's, been profitable for a few years and it's doing really well. So I think, of course, at some point we have to go public. There's no rush to do that. I mean, we've got lots of money in the bank, profitable. So I think the category, is whether it be, gaming, social, all these things are woven together. There's a tremendously big opportunity, and I think we just want to pick the time to go public when the time is right, right?
Cool.
So, and when we feel, grown up enough to shoulder that responsibility, right? Being able to go public and being the right type of company to go public. I'm not saying that well, but we have to figure out when the right time is.
Yeah, that's right. It is. Like you said, it's all about timing.
Yeah, it's all about timing.
It's all about timing. Well, Craig, I'm so glad we had this conversation. You are the factor, no question. I'm so happy for all your success, and I wish you tons more. And before we leave, I want you to drop your sage wisdom of parting words. What would you give for your parting words and advice for all of the founders and all of the business people out there watching The Factor?
Hmm. Oh boy, this is good. This is good, Sonny. How do I wrap this up? Um, Interesting. Let's see. Big parting words. We haven't really talked about this yet. I don't know why this comes to mind. Maybe it's just something we haven't talked about yet. But I think we talk about entrepreneurship in the Valley as this big heroic thing, and I think in a lot of ways it is. But it's also an act of obsession, right? It's a selfish act in of itself. Like you're going to focus on this business to the absence of your family and these other things. And I think it's great to tackle that hero's journey, but do it with your eyes open, right? So, what I'm really glad about is two things. One is when I was doing it, I had a very good conversation with my wife about really what was involved, right? And how do we actually think about part of our marriage and our family is this startup, and how do we all work together, whether that be, I didn't do family dinners, but we had family breakfasts because I worked too late, and we figured out how to make it work. And then also I felt really good about knowing when it was time to hang it up, right? And that when my kids were getting older, they really needed me. And you can't do that job if you're not fully committed to it. You'd be able to put 95% of your brain cycles on it. So, approaching this idea of, yeah, it's cool to be a CEO, it's cool to start a company, but how do you attack it with the intention of living a good life, right? Being a good father, being a good husband, and you can, but you just need to do it with your eyes open. You need to do it with intention.
Well said. Well said. Yeah. Keep your balance. That's good. Good parting words.
Thank
All
you,
right,
son.
Craig. Well, thank you, brother. I'll give you a little Zoom high five. Can't wait to do that in person sometime and share a beer. And until then, keep rocking at Roblox. And I really appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, Sonny. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.